Al-Qaeda sends a chilling message to Ibrahim Traoré after the attack. Moments after the attack, a chilling message arrived. Sent straight from Al-Qaeda to President Ibrahim Traoré. What did it say? And how did Traoré respond? You won't believe what's unfolding right now. This just in, Al-Qaeda has issued a direct and threatening message to Ibrahim Traoré following a deadly strike. This isn't just about one man, it's about the future of an entire nation under siege. Just days after a deadly terrorist strike, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré has received a disturbing message directly from Al-Qaeda-affiliated militants. In this video, we break down the message, what it means for Traoré's leadership, and the bold steps being taken to defend Burkina Faso and all of West Africa. Is this a warning? A declaration of war? Or a desperate response to Traoré's growing power in Africa? What you'll discover in this video, the content and context of Al-Qaeda's message to Ibrahim Traoré. How Traoré and Burkina Faso's military are responding. What this means for national and regional security in West Africa. The rising threat of terrorism in the Sahel region. How Traoré's anti-terror strategies are shaking extremist networks. Africa's fight for freedom is under attack. This is not just about Burkina Faso, it's about Africa's fight for sovereignty, stability, and strength in the face of foreign-backed insurgencies. Join the conversation. What do you think of Al-Qaeda's message? Comment your thoughts, like the video, and subscribe to stay informed on the latest developments across Africa. The content and context of Al-Qaeda's message to Ibrahim Traoré. Al-Qaeda's primary affiliate in the Sahel, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, JNIM, has not publicly released a direct, explicit message addressed solely to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim president of Burkina Faso. However, NIM's communications, particularly through its leaders like Mahmoud Barry and Amadou Kofa, provide insight into the group's stance toward Traoré's regime. These messages are contextualized by Burkina Faso's ongoing insurgency, Traoré's anti-Western policies, and his government's aggressive counter-terrorism approach. The content and context of these communications include threats against urban centers. In November 2024, NIM spokesperson Mahmoud Barry, a high-ranking leader in Kadaba Messina, threatened to get you in the big cities, signaling an intent to escalate attacks beyond rural areas into urban centers like Ouagadougou. Following the May 11, 2025, attack on Djibo, a provincial capital, Barry encouraged civilians to avoid military sites and leave the city for safety, framing JNIM as protectors of communities against Traoré's forces. This messaging aims to undermine the junta's legitimacy by portraying it as a threat to civilian safety. Exploitation of civilian grievances. NIM's rhetoric capitalizes on human rights abuses by Traoré's forces and the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, a civilian militia. A May 2024 Human Rights Watch report documented an army-directed massacre of over 100 Fulani civilians, which JNIM uses to fuel recruitment by posing as defenders of marginalized ethnic groups. Amadou Kofa, NIM's second-in-command, told France 24 in 2024 that the junta's all-out onslaught drives recruitment, as communities feel targeted by state violence. Conditional openness to negotiation. Kofa has expressed willingness to negotiate with the juntas of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but only under Sharia law, a condition unlikely to be accepted by Traoré's secular regime. This offer is strategic, aiming to project JNIM as a legitimate governing force while highlighting the junta's refusal to engage, thus justifying further attacks. Context of Traoré's policies. NIM's messages are shaped by Traoré's anti-imperialist stance and his expulsion of Western forces, particularly French troops in February 2023, which created a security vacuum. By aligning with Russia and forming the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, Traoré has positioned Burkina Faso as a target for jihadist groups seeking to exploit anti-Western sentiment while challenging his claim to restore sovereignty. Strategic objectives. NIM's communications aim to destabilize Traoré's regime by intensifying attacks, discouraging civilian cooperation with the state, and imposing shadow governance through sieges. The group's May 2025 attack on Djibo, where hundreds of fighters overran a military base and killed dozens, demonstrates its capacity to challenge state control. These messages are part of a broader strategy to expand territorial influence and undermine the junta's narrative of progress. How Traoré and Burkina Faso's military are responding. Traoré's response to the jihadist threat, including NIM's actions and messages, is characterized by a strategy of total war, heavy reliance on civilian militias, and a pivot to non-Western alliances. His approach prioritizes military repression over negotiation, reflecting his belief that terrorism is a tool of imperialist destabilization. Key responses include military mobilization and general conscription. In April 2023, Traoré declared a general mobilization to recapture 40% of Burkina Faso's territory controlled by jihadists. This included recruiting 50,000 to 90,000 volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland (VDP), civilian auxiliaries with minimal training, 2 to 3 weeks, to bolster the military's manpower. The junta has also acquired new military equipment, including drones, and reorganized security forces to enhance offensive capabilities. Rejection of dialogue. Unlike his predecessors, Traoré has discontinued de-radicalization and reintegration programs, opting for a hardline stance that rejects negotiations with jihadist groups. He has publicly called on terrorists to lay down their arms, dismissing COFA's negotiation offer as incompatible with his secular governance model. Forced conscription of critics. Traoré's regime has used conscription to silence dissent, forcibly drafting critics like anesthesiologist Aruna Lure and opposition politician Ablas Ouedraogo into military service, often sending them to frontline combat zones. This tactic aims to neutralize internal threats while addressing manpower shortages. Alliance with Russia. Following the expulsion of French troops, Traoré has deepened ties with Russia, welcoming 100 to 300 Africa Corps, formerly Wagner, mercenaries in 2024 to protect the regime and support counter-terrorism operations. His May 2025 visit to Moscow and meetings with Vladimir Putin underscore this shift. Authoritarian measures. The junta has cracked down on journalists, activists, and suspected coup plotters, accusing them of collaborating with terrorists. In June 2024, Traoré claimed to have arrested military personnel demonstrably complicit with jihadists, linking internal dissent to external threats. This has led to a shrinking civic space, with reports of torture and abductions. Despite these efforts, security has deteriorated, with NIM's May 2025 attack on Djibo and other locations killing over 100 soldiers and civilians, highlighting the military's vulnerabilities. The VDP's involvement in human rights abuses, including ethnically motivated violence against Fulani communities, has further fueled insurgent recruitment. What this means for national and regional security in West Africa. The interplay between NIM's threats and Traoré's responses has profound implications for Burkina Faso and the West African region, particularly in the context of the Sahel's volatile security environment. National instability. Burkina Faso's loss of 40% of its territory to jihadists, coupled with 980 civilian deaths in state-led operations in 2024, undermines Traoré's claim of reclaiming 70% of the country. The May 2025 Djibo attack demonstrates NIM's ability to overrun population centers, increasing the risk of further coups, as seen in previous attacks sparking unrest. The junta's authoritarian measures, such as forced conscription, risk alienating civilians and weakening national cohesion. Regional spillover. The Sahel's porous borders, particularly in the Liptako-Gourma region, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, facilitate the spread of jihadist violence. NIM's expansion into Burkina Faso's Hauts-Bassins, center-west, and center-south regions threatens coastal states like Ghana and Ivory Coast. The dissolution of the G5 Sahel and the AES's focus on anti-Western rhetoric over coordinated counterterrorism weaken regional security frameworks. Humanitarian crisis. Over 3 million internally displaced persons, IDPs, and 36,000 refugees in Burkina Faso exacerbate the humanitarian crisis, with thousands of schools and health facilities closed. This creates fertile ground for jihadist recruitment, as groups like JNIM exploit economic hardship and state neglect. Geopolitical shifts. The AES's alignment with Russia and withdrawal from ECOWAS isolate Burkina Faso from Western support, limiting access to counterterrorism resources. Russia's limited capacity to replace French and U.S. support, combined with the AES's nascent structure, leaves the region vulnerable to jihadist expansion. Threat to coastal states. The UN's Vladimir Voronkov warned in August 2024 that JNIM and Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS, could control a vast territory from Mali to northern Nigeria, threatening coastal West African states. This risk is heightened by the AES's strained relations with neighbors like Ivory Coast, accused of supporting coup plots against Traoré. The combination of NIM's aggressive tactics and Traoré's hardline policies risks escalating violence and destabilizing the region, with potential ripple effects across West Africa. The rising threat of terrorism in the Sahel region. The Sahel has become a global epicenter of terrorism, with Burkina Faso bearing the brunt as the country most impacted by terrorism for 2 consecutive years, according to the 2025 Global Terrorism Index. Key factors driving this threat include proliferation of jihadist groups, JNIM, formed in 2017 from Al-Qaeda affiliates, and ISGS dominate the Sahel, operating in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. NIM's attacks, such as the August 2024 Barcelogo massacre, hundreds killed, and May 2025 Djibo assault, demonstrate its growing capacity. ISGS has expanded operations in Burkina Faso's east, targeting civilians and security forces post-Libya instability. The 2011 NATO intervention in Libya destabilized the Sahel by spreading weapons and fighters, reigniting Tuareg rebellions and empowering jihadist groups. The Liptako-Gourma region, spanning Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, is a hotbed of violence due to ungoverned spaces. Ethnic and economic grievances. Jihadist groups exploit communal tensions, particularly against Fulani communities, and economic stagnation. Burkina Faso's stagnating economy, with 44% of the population below the poverty line, fuels recruitment. Withdrawal of Western forces, the expulsion of French troops, 4,300 across the Sahel, and U.S. forces from Niger in 2024 has created a security vacuum, with the G5 Sahel's dissolution further weakening regional coordination. Russian mercenaries, limited in number and expertise, have failed to fill this gap. Escalating violence. Terrorism deaths in the Sahel accounted for 51% of global terrorism deaths in 2024, with Burkina Faso alone reporting 1,151 civilian deaths linked to jihadists. Attacks have spread from northern and eastern regions to Burkina Faso's south and west, threatening urban centers. The rising threat is compounded by the AES's focus on sovereignty over effective counterterrorism, leaving the Sahel vulnerable to further jihadist expansion. How Traoré's anti-terror strategies are shaking extremist networks. Traoré's anti-terror strategies, while bold, have had mixed results, disrupting jihadist networks in some areas but inadvertently strengthening them in others due to human rights abuses and strategic missteps. Military offensives and VDP expansion. Traoré's recruitment of 50,000 to 90,000 VDP members and acquisition of drones and military equipment aimed to overwhelm jihadist groups through sheer force. The junta claims to have reclaimed 70% of territory, though independent estimates suggest 40% remains under jihadist control. Attacks like the June 2024 assault, where JNIM killed 100 soldiers, indicate limited success. Disrupting financing. Traoré's nationalization of gold mines and ban on unrefined gold exports aim to cut off jihadist funding, as groups like JNIM profit from illicit gold trade. The 2023 establishment of a gold anti-fraud agency and a national gold refinery processing 150 tons annually seeks to redirect revenues to state coffers. Authoritarian tactics. Forced conscription of critics and crackdowns on dissent aim to eliminate internal support for jihadists, but these measures have backfired, alienating communities and driving recruitment. The VDP's ethnically motivated violence, particularly against Fulani, has enabled JNIM to pose as protectors, boosting its ranks. Russian support. The deployment of Russian mercenaries has provided regime protection but limited battlefield impact. Unlike French forces, which conducted targeted operations, Russian support focuses on securing Traoré, not dismantling jihadist networks. Unintended consequences. Traoré's total war strategy, including state-sanctioned massacres, has fueled retaliatory cycles. A 2024 Amnesty International report noted that civilian deaths by state forces, 980 in 2024, nearly matched jihadist killings, strengthening NIM's narrative and recruitment. The May 2025 Djibo attack, where JNIM used captured anti-aircraft guns, highlights its adaptability. While Traoré's strategies have disrupted some jihadist operations, particularly through increased military presence, they have also entrenched cycles of violence, undermining long-term stability. Conclusion. Al-Qaeda's affiliate JNIM has issued indirect messages to Traoré, threatening urban attacks, exploiting state abuses, and offering conditional negotiations to undermine his regime's legitimacy. Traoré's response, general mobilization, VDP expansion, and Russian alliances, reflects a hardline stance but has failed to curb jihadist advances, as seen in the May 2025 Djibo attack. Nationally, Burkina Faso faces instability and a humanitarian crisis, while regionally, the AES's isolation and the Sahel security vacuum threaten coastal West Africa. The rising terrorism threat, driven by post-Libya instability and economic grievances, is exacerbated by the withdrawal of Western forces. Traoré's strategies disrupt jihadist financing but fuel recruitment through civilian abuses, creating a complex security challenge. His leadership, while symbolically powerful, risks entrenching conflict unless balanced with governance reforms and regional cooperation.